This is the video for the tutorial voice FM-X multi-MS example. And this performance is showing how to use multiple motion sequences within our performance to create complex harmonic motions and behaviors. So let's play the initial sound here. As I mentioned in the article, this is an FM recreation of a pulse width modulation style synth pad. So let's go into edit mode and take a look at the details on how we've put this all together. So I've chosen algorithm 67 here, which gives us 4 separate 2-operator stacks, and I'm using operators 3 through 8 to create our bass pad sound. I'm going to isolate them here on the little operator mutes, so you can hear just the 8-7 pair. And basically, the other 2 pairs, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, are duplicates of that and just detuned. And how we're creating the pulse modulation effect is by modulating a square wave carrier. You see I have the spectral set to odd with a skirt of 6, with a sawtooth wave modulator. So we have the all one wave with a skirt of 3. And then how we create the differences in the pulse width is by varying the level. So to do that, I am using our motion sequence. So let's show you what we're doing here. We're actually using lane 4 for this. And let's edit the sequence. So we're using this basic sinusoidal shape to give us a slow shifting from square wave to narrow pulse and back. Now, as I mentioned, this is sort of an FM recreation of pulse width modulation. Now, within FM-X in the montage, this is actually more of a hybrid saw pulse type of shifting that's going on, because to do true pulse width modulation with the proper behavior of the harmonic shifts, you would have to phase shift your modulating sawtooth wave 90 degrees relative to the carrier, and we can't do that here, but we still get a really nice texture that's evocative of that and creates a very nice synth pad bass. So let's go to the control destination we have set up for our motion sequence. And you can see here that motion lane 4 is set up to control operator level of ops 3, 5, and 7. And we are decreasing it as the motion sequence goes up, and that's because I set the base value of the modulators at 91, so we're going to actually bring it down and then back up. I also added a little bit of detune on these same operators to enhance the thin pulse character of it as it hits the edges of the modulation. So turn all our operators back on here, and this is our bass pad sound. So you can hear the bass tone. I'm going to turn off the motion sequence by hitting the motion sequence on/off button. That's just the basic FM pulse type sound. So now let's go ahead and look at the other components of the sound. So exiting out to the performance mode, you can see we have a couple of assignable parameters on our knobs. Let's go to knob 3 here. We've got pulse width pad EG. If I turn it all the way to the right, this is going to speed up the envelope, so we have a short percussive type of thing. Bring it all the way left. We slow down the attack, make it more pad-like. And we'll put it back to 24. So I mentioned this is an example of using multiple motion sequences in a sound. So let's turn down our pad part and turn up what I've called here the motion sequence attack mix. So as I mentioned, I'm using operators 3 through 8 to create our pad bass, and now we're just using operators 1 and 2 to create this complicated harmonic shifting sort of heart sync attack. That loops through this sort of, FME metallic thing with a wave sequency kind of effect. So let's go to the individual motion sequences. And first thing I'm going to do here, we're going to do listen to them in isolation. So I'm going to turn off all of them. And this is how the basic operators 1 and 2 stack sounds. It's just a basic FM type of wave, very static. So let's turn on motion sequence 1. And you can see the shape that I programmed for it. So to see this in greater detail, let's go into Edit Sequence. And now you can see how we've got the first 8 steps using the standard pulse shape set to 7 to give us that decaying character. And we are using pulse B for the second 8 steps on threshold set to be these solid level tiers. So let's hear this again. So we only hear it play through once because I've set the loop to off. So now let's isolate number 2 and hear what it's doing. And again, let's see what that looks blown up. You see all our various steps. Again, these are all set to be the trapezoid setting, and we've got our parameter values set to 0. So again, we have these particular flat plateaus. Now you'll hear this one loops endlessly because of course I've set it to the loop being on. So now we'll isolate our third guy. And let's blow that up. And here we're just using the A pattern. I'm using the hold to create my steps here. I'll go into a little bit later why I use the other shapes to create the same thing. It goes into the parameter control of the pulse shape that we're going to highlight a little bit later. So anyway, here this is again. So now we're going to turn them all back on so you can hear the combination. So now let's look at the destinations each part of these are controlling. So we'll go to our mod control page here, and we're going to go to modulation settings for our motion sequence lane 1. And this is controlling the operator level or modulation index of operator 1 along with its resonance. Motion sequence lane 2, we have it set up to control the operator frequency of operator 1. I've got it set for maximum depth. And this is so with the step values I have for motion sequence lane 2, we'll step through those integer harmonic ratios. Now on motion sequence lane 3, we're going to control the spectral wave of our carrier wave, and we're also going to control the level of our modulator. Now I've got the modulator set to a negative value here because as we change our spectral wave shape from sine to our non-sine waves, which start with harmonic content of their own, to prevent aliasing and such, we want to bring the level down of our modulator. So you heard in the example, we're right on the edge of it in this range. We've used some key scaling to take it out up top, but overall we wanted to make sure our sound stays without too much aliasing noise. Of course, you can edit that and increase it if you like. But now let's turn up our bass pad so you hear the entire sound put together. So I want to backtrack a little bit and let's go back into our motion sequences here. And I told you I did some different ways to get this flat stepped shape. The default is to use the hold shape for the pulse, but in the other motion sequences I achieved it by doing a couple different things. I've used the threshold wave and the trapezoid wave, and I've set these parameters over here, the parameter 1 and parameter 2, to get that shape. You'll see if we change these parameters that the shape changes. So we can change the leading and trailing edge by parameters 1 and 2. And so the reason why I chose to use the trapezoid shape here for this is because I've turned the control parameter on for our motion sequence. This is going to become important when we go out into performance mode to see what we can change in real time, because by assigning our real-time knobs to the arpeggiator and motion sequence assignments versus the programmable assignments, we can actually change the shape of this stuff all in real time, and I'll show that a little bit later. Anyway, let's actually exit back out to performance mode. Bring everything up. So next, let's turn on the arpeggiator, and now we can hear how those motion sequences interact with the arpeggiator based on their unit multiply values. So I've turned the arpeggiator button on, and we're going to play a chord. So that's sort of the cool, neat pulsating effect, and the peaks and valleys of the various motion control modulations of all those FM-X parameters interplay with our arpeggiator. Alright, so I mentioned I've set this up using particular shapes in the motion sequence with their control parameter turned on, so I can actually morph those various pulse shapes in real time. So I'm going to hit our ARP/MS button, so the knob assignments change to these various parameters of our arpeggiator and motion sequence, and we're going to mess with this shape parameter. So because I've turned on the control flag for our motion sequence shape parameters, as I change this knob, I'm going to change those parameter values, and in this particular case, those trapezoid waves were changing the slope of the trailing and leading end to go from a pure square shape like the hold pulse to give us these nice little chirps ups and down. So other things we can play with here is, of course, the amplitude or depth of the modulation coming from the motion sequences. And we also play with some arpeggiator things here. We can do the gate time to basically lengthen or shorten the articulation of the way the notes are triggered. And of course, we can play around with our swing as well. So let's reset all our guys here. And we're back to our original sound. If you want to get a little more detail on how this was put together, make sure you read the article series Manny's FM-Xplorations on YamahaSynth.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.